You react because you are weak. It is a harsh truth, a cold blade pressed against the throat of your ego. But it is the only truth that matters in the architecture of power. Every time you lose your temper, every time your pulse quickens because of a stray comment, and every time you seek the pathetic warmth of validation from people you don't even respect, you are handing over the leash of your life. You are a puppet, vibrating with the anxieties of the masses, dancing to a tune composed by your enemies. You think your honesty or your passion is a virtue, but in the Zadrez social, the social chess of the elite, it is nothing more than a neon sign pointing toward your vulnerabilities. You are easy to read, easy to provoke, and therefore remarkably easy to eliminate. You live in a state of reactive slavery, a prisoner to the whims of the environment around you. But there is another way, a colder way. Thomas Shelby does not react. He orchestrates. He understands that the moment you show what you feel, you lose the ability to control what happens. He stands in the center of the storm, not because he is numb, but because he has mastered the art of calculated indifference. This is the psychological armor that transforms a man from a target into a sovereign. It is a state of being where your internal peace is a fortress that no insult can breach and no threat can shake. By the end of this transmission, you will understand how to build this fortress for yourself. You will learn the tricks of dark psychology that allow you to remain unreadable while everyone else is screaming for attention. What Thomas Shelby mastered in the industrial smoke and blood of 20th century Birmingham, Niccolò Machiavelli had already codified in the courts of 16th century Italy. This is not the passive not caring of the lazy. This is strategic sovereignty. It is the deliberate choice to withhold your energy until the exact moment it can be used to destroy your opposition. If you are tired of being the one who reacts, and you are ready to become the one who acts, pay attention. The era of your transparency ends today. If you have chosen the path of the storm rather than the path of the leaf blown by the wind, subscribe and claim your seat at the table. Comment, "I am the storm," to signal your intent. The weak will watch this and forget. The elite will watch this and evolve. The face is the first line of defense in the war of the mind, yet most men treat it like an open book, inviting their enemies to read every chapter of their fear and hesitation. In the world of power, your expressions are not tools for connection. They are leaks in your hull. Thomas Shelby's greatest weapon is not the razor in his cap, but the void in his eyes. He understands the Shelby law. Never let them see the blade until it's in their ribs. This means maintaining a face like a desert, vast, shifting, and entirely barren of clues. To provide a reaction is to provide a map to your soul. If you smile to please a superior, you show subservience. If you scowl at an insult, you show that the insulter has power over your emotions. Both are failures of sovereignty. Consider the atmosphere in the first season of Peaky Blinders when Thomas Shelby has his first formal encounter with the erratic kingpin Billy Kimber. The room is thick with the scent of coal dust, expensive tobacco, and the palpable electricity of impending violence. Kimber enters like a thunderstorm, loud, vulgar, and surrounded by the noise of his own ego. He shouts, he threatens, and he attempts to physically dominate the space with his presence. He is a man who relies on the intimidation of the now. In contrast, Tommy sits there, almost unnervingly still. He does not stand up to meet Kimber's height. He does not raise his voice to match Kimber's volume. He sips his tea with a steady hand, his eyes fixed on a point that seems to exist behind Kimber's head. His pulse never rises. He treats a man who could order his death in a heartbeat as if he were a minor inconvenience. a fly buzzing around a master's head. This is the void of expression. By showing nothing, Tommy forces Kimber to fill the silence with his own insecurity. Kimber becomes louder and more aggressive because he cannot get a read on Tommy. And in that aggression, Kimber reveals his own lack of control. Tommy is the one in the chair, but he is the one who owns the room. This is the living embodiment of the Machiavellian doctrine. In The Prince, Machiavelli teaches that a leader must be a great pretender and dissembler. He argued that while it is good to seem virtuous, a ruler must be able to hide his true intentions behind a mask of necessity. To show emotion is to show your hand. To show nothing is to own the table. Machiavelli knew that the masses are always taken by appearances and by the outcome of an event. If your appearance is one of unbreakable calm, the world assumes you have a hidden strength that justifies that calm, even if you are standing on the edge of a precipice. It creates a psychological paradox for your opponent. They begin to wonder what you know that they don't. They start to fear that their attacks are not landing, which leads them to doubt their own power. The common man lives in a state of biological transparency. When he is nervous, he fidgets. When he is angry, his face flushes and his voice cracks. He is a slave to his nervous system, a biological machine that telegraphs its internal state to everyone in the vicinity. He thinks he is being authentic, but in reality, he is just being predictable. The man of power, however, uses his face as a mask. He understands that every muscle twitch is a piece of data that can be used against him. He adopts the coldness of a statue not out of boredom, but out of a calculated desire to exhaust his opponents. He knows that humans are evolutionarily wired to seek feedback. When you deny someone that feedback, when you meet their anger with a blank stare, or their flattery with a neutral nod, you trigger a prediction error in their brain. They become desperate to find a crack in your armor, and in that desperation, they become clumsy. To apply this in the modern Zadrez social, you must begin with the 5-second delay. In your next high-stakes meeting, or the next time someone tries to provoke you in a social setting, do not respond immediately. Even if the answer is simple, wait 5 full seconds while maintaining neutral eye contact. This brief silence acts as a filter, stripping the emotional reactivity from your response and forcing the other person to sit in the discomfort of their own words. It signals that you are processing the information on your own terms, not theirs. Combine this with the deliberate lowering of your vocal pitch. A high-pitched voice is a biological signal of high cortisol, the stress hormone. By keeping your voice low and slow, you are hacking your own biology and projecting an aura of absolute authority. When you walk into a room, do not scan for approval. Keep your gaze steady and your movements economical. In relationships, when a partner tries to use emotional volatility to control you, respond with the Shelby void. Do not argue, do not defend, and do not explain. Simply observe. When they realize their emotional fire cannot find any fuel in you, the fire will die out, and they will be left standing in the cold, forced to reckon with your silence. This is not cruelty. It is the restoration of your internal monarchy. You are the king of your own mind, and you do not allow the peasants to storm the gates of your peace. You become the predator who watches from the shadows, unreadable, and therefore invincible. You are no longer a participant in the drama of others. You are the architect of the reality they are forced to inhabit. That is the coldest power. That is the art of the void. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of an unbearable, suffocating pressure. In the hierarchy of power, the man who speaks the most is the man who reveals the most, and the man who reveals the most is the man who can be most easily conquered. Thomas Shelby knows that words are expensive, and he is a man who hates to waste currency. He understands that the moment you open your mouth to explain yourself, to defend your honor, or to fill an awkward gap in a conversation, you are bleeding authority. Silence is a vacuum, and human nature abhors a vacuum. When you remain silent, the people around you will feel a desperate, primal urge to fill that void with their own words, their own secrets, and their own insecurities. They will talk themselves into a corner, and all you have to do is watch. Consider the surgical precision of silence in the second season, specifically during the high-stakes meeting with the Epsom Derby officials. These are men of high standing, men who believe they own the world because they were born into it. They sit across from Tommy with an air of unearned superiority, expecting the gangster from Birmingham to be loud, aggressive, and easily provoked. They expect him to bark like a dog so they can treat him like one. But Tommy does not bark. He sits in a chair that he has essentially commandeered, his body language relaxed but lethal. As the officials speak, trying to set terms and exert their influence, Tommy says almost nothing. He doesn't nod, he doesn't shake his head, and he certainly doesn't interrupt. He lets their words hang in the air, rotting like unpicked fruit. The longer he stays silent, the more the officials begin to fidget. They look at each other, their eyes darting, searching for a cue that isn't coming. The silence becomes a mirror reflecting their own lack of control. By the time Tommy finally speaks, his voice is a low, quiet rasp that carries the weight of a death sentence. He has let the weight of his presence and the dark reputation of the Peaky Blinders do the heavy lifting. He didn't need to win the argument because he had already won the psychological war before he even sat down. This is the manifestation of the Machiavellian principle that it is far safer to be feared than to be loved. Machiavelli understood that love is a fickle bond of obligation that men break at the first sign of their own advantage, but fear is maintained by a dread of punishment which never fails. Silence is the primary tool for cultivating this dread. When you are silent, you are unpredictable. And in the eyes of an opponent, unpredictability is the most terrifying form of power. A man who shouts is a man who is venting his internal pressure. He is predictable. A man who stays silent is a man who is building internal pressure. He is a ticking bomb. Machiavelli's prince knows that the aura of the sovereign is built on the foundation of the unknown. If the people, or your enemies, cannot map the boundaries of your mind, they will assume those boundaries are infinite. Your silence creates a legendary status that your words could never sustain. It forces the world to speculate about your brilliance rather than confirming your mediocrity through constant chatter. The common man is terrified of silence. For him, a gap in conversation is a social failure, a wound that must be stitched closed with nervous laughter, useless anecdotes, and constant self-justification. He explains his actions because he craves the approval of the tribe. He tells people his plans because he wants the dopamine hit of their praise before he has even done the work. He is a leaky vessel, pouring out his strategic potential for the sake of momentary comfort. The man of power, however, views silence as a weapon of mass extraction. He understands that in any negotiation, the person who speaks first after a proposal is usually the one who loses. He uses strategic dead air to make the other person feel so uncomfortable that they start making concessions just to break the tension. He knows that his silence is a vacuum that sucks the leverage right out of his opponent's hands. To master the currency of silence in the modern Zadrez social, you must first learn to stop the value leak. In your next professional negotiation or high-stakes social interaction, after you state your price or your position, stop. Do not add a because. Do not try to justify why you deserve what you're asking for. Just look them in the eye and wait. Let the silence stretch until it feels painful. You will see them start to sweat, start to ramble, and eventually start to cave. In social settings, when someone insults you or tries to alpha you with a backhanded compliment, do not get angry. Anger is a reaction, and a reaction is a gift. Instead, give them 3 seconds of total silence and a blank stare before asking, "Are you finished?" This demonstrates that their words have zero impact on your internal state, which is the ultimate form of dominance. Use silence as a filter for your circle as well. Stop being the one who reaches out first. See who values your presence enough to pursue it. If they don't, their absence is your gain. Remember, the lion doesn't need to roar to prove he's a lion. The roar is for the frightened. The king simply sits, silent and watchful, knowing that his kingdom is secured by the things he chooses not to say. The second pillar of the cold heart is the Shelby law. I have no limitations. This isn't a boast of physical strength. It is a declaration of total psychological freedom. It means that you have reached a level of radical detachment from outcomes where you are willing to lose everything to gain everything. Most men are paralyzed by the what if. They are held hostage by their mortgages, their reputations, and their fear of failure. They are easy to manipulate because they have things they are afraid to lose. Thomas Shelby is dangerous because he has already died once. In the tunnels of France during the Great War, the man he was buried under the mud and the blood. The man who returned to Birmingham is a ghost who understands that life is a bonus. And because he does not fear the end, he does not fear the journey. When you are detached from the outcome, you cannot be threatened, you cannot be bribed, and you cannot be broken. You are operating from a position of absolute leverage. We see this chilling detachment in its most visceral form in the 4th season, during the opening moments when Tommy and his family are facing their own execution. His brothers are spiraling, his sister is in shock, and the world they built is being dismantled by the state. The smell of the damp prison walls and the sound of the guards' boots are a symphony of doom. Yet Tommy remains eerily, almost inhumanly, calm. He isn't panicking because he has already done the math. He has looked into the abyss and accepted the possibility of his own destruction long ago. Because he has accepted the worst-case scenario, his mind is free to focus on the moves that will prevent it. He has detached himself from the fear of death itself, viewing the entire situation as a complex puzzle rather than a personal tragedy. He isn't hoping for a miracle. He is executing a sequence. His family sees a gallows. Tommy sees a chessboard where the king is temporarily in check, but still has moves to make. This detachment is what allows him to negotiate with the very people holding the rope. Machiavelli would call this the mastery of virtù over fortuna. He argued that fortune is like a violent river that, when it rages, floods the plains and destroys everything in its path. But a man of true virtù, a man of strategic power, builds dikes and dams when the weather is calm, so that when the river rises, its force is controlled. Radical detachment is the ultimate dam. To control your destiny, you must be cold and calculated, even when your world is on fire. Machiavelli warned that the prince who relies on luck or on the temporary goodwill of others is destined for ruin. You must be prepared for the betrayal, for the market crash, and for the loss of status. If you are emotionally attached to the win, you become desperate. And a desperate man is a man who makes mistakes. By detaching from the outcome, you remain the master of your own internal state. Regardless of whether fortune smiles or spits on you, You become the one who can think clearly while everyone else is blinded by tears or rage. The common man is a slave to his expectations. He enters a deal needing it to go through. He enters a relationship needing to be loved. This need is a scent that predators can smell from miles away. It makes him weak, agreeable, and easily exploited. He is constantly asking, "What if they don't like me?" Or, "What if I fail?" This anxiety drains his energy and clouds his judgment. The man of power, however, operates with a "so what" mindset. If the deal fails, so what? There are other markets. If the person leaves, so what? There are other allies. He is not a victim of his environment, he is a player in it. He understands that the only thing he truly owns is his own resolve. This detachment gives him the coldest power, the power to walk away from any table at any time. And the man who is willing to walk away is always the one who sets the price. Applying this today requires the mental grave technique. Before you enter any high-stakes situation, a job interview, a confrontation, or a major investment, take 5 minutes to sit in silence. Visualize the worst possible outcome in vivid detail. See the failure, feel the embarrassment, and acknowledge the loss. Then, accept it. Tell yourself, if this happens, I will still be standing. I will still be me. By pre-accepting the loss, you strip it of its power over you. You enter the room as a dead man walking, which ironically makes you the most alive and dangerous person in the room. You no longer have the nervous energy of someone trying to win. You have the static energy of someone who cannot be defeated. In your social life, practice the law of the walk-away. Never let yourself need anyone's company more than they need yours. If the respect isn't there, detach immediately. Do not argue for your value. Simply remove your presence. In your career, always have a Plan B so robust that Plan A becomes a choice, not a necessity. When you remove the limitation of fear, you become a force of nature. You stop reacting to the world and start making the world react to you. You become like Thomas Shelby, a man with no limitations because he has no attachments to anything that can be taken away. You are the sovereign of the void, and in that void, you find the strength to build an empire that the common man can only dream of. The currency of the world is not gold or paper, it is leverage. Most men are sentimental fools, burdened by the weight of their own hearts, dragging the anchors of family, friendship, and loyalty behind them as they try to navigate the shark-infested waters of the social hierarchy. They fail because they believe in the lie of personal connection. Thomas Shelby operates on a different frequency. He understands the Shelby law with a chilling clarity. No emotions in business. In the theater of power, there are no relatives, no enemies, and no lovers. There are only assets to be utilized and liabilities to be liquidated. To be indifferent is to be free from the manipulation of those who try to use your feelings as a hook to pull you into their agenda. When you view every interaction through the cold lens of utility, you become a ghost in the machine, a player who sees the gears while everyone else is distracted by the oil. To see this weaponized indifference in its purest form, we must look at the third season, where Tommy is entangled with the Russian Duchess, Tatiana Petrovna. The setting is one of suffocating decadence, expensive silks, heavy perfumes, and the manic energy of a woman who has lost her world and replaced it with madness. Tatiana is a chaotic element, a siren designed to lure a man's focus away from his mission. She is beautiful, dangerous, and deeply unstable. A common man would be seduced by her power or repulsed by her insanity. Either way, he would be emotionally compromised. But observe Tommy in Season 3, Episode 5. He acknowledges her beauty with the same clinical detachment a jeweler uses to inspect a flawed diamond. He allows her into his bed, not because he is lonely, but because she is a conduit to the information and the jewels he needs for his heist, even when she is crawling across the floor, testing the boundaries of his sanity. Tommy remains a statue of ice. He treats her not as a woman, but as a high-risk asset in a multi-million-pound operation. His eyes never lose their strategic focus. He is not with her. He is observing her while he calculates the exact moment her usefulness will expire. He has weaponized his own intimacy, turning a potential weakness into a platform for his ultimate victory. This is the cold pragmatism that Machiavelli demanded of the sovereign. In The Prince, he warned that the man who relies on the virtue of others is building a house on sand. People are ungrateful, fickle, and greedy. Their loyalty lasts only as long as it serves them. Therefore, the man of power must treat relationships through the lens of pure utility. Machiavelli argued that it is much safer to be feared than loved, because love is held by a chain of obligation which, men being selfish, is broken whenever it serves their purpose. But fear is maintained by a dread of punishment which never fails. By removing emotion from your business and social dealings, you are following the Machiavellian mandate to rely only on what you can control. You do not ask people to do things out of the kindness of their hearts. You structure the world so that it is in their absolute self-interest to do exactly what you want. You become a master of the human mechanism, understanding that every person has a price, a pressure point, and a shelf life. The common man lets his heart sabotage his head. He keeps friends around who drain his energy because of a shared history. He stays in a stagnant career because he feels a false sense of loyalty to a company that would replace him in a heartbeat. He allows family members to guilt-trip him into making bad strategic decisions. He is a victim of his own empathy. The man of power, however, views the world as a spreadsheet of leverage. He performs a constant audit of his inner circle, identifying who is contributing to his sovereignty and who is a drain on his resources. He is capable of a calculated cruelty, the ability to cut a tie or fire a subordinate with the same lack of emotion one uses to prune a dying branch. He knows that, in the long run, the preservation of the empire is more important than the temporary feelings of the individuals within it. Applying this weaponized indifference today requires you to adopt a utility-first mindset. The next time someone tries to use a personal feeling or a guilt trip to sway your decision, do not get defensive. Simply respond with a cold, flat observation. That is a personal feeling. Now let's get back to the facts of the arrangement. This immediately strips them of their emotional leverage and forces the interaction back into the realm of your control. You must also conduct a sovereignty audit on your social circle. Identify the people who are liabilities, the gossips, the emotional vampires, and the stagnant minds. You do not need to make a scene. You simply stop investing your energy in them. Execute these necessary cruelties quickly and without apology. When you stop caring about being liked and start caring about being effective, the world begins to rearrange itself around your will. You are not here to make friends. You are here to build a legacy. And a legacy is built on the bones of those who were not useful enough to survive the journey. The greatest illusion of the modern age is the myth of availability. We live in a world where everyone is a click away, where your attention is a commodity to be harvested by anyone with a smartphone. To be available is to be cheap. To be reachable at all times is to signal to the world that your time has no value, and therefore, you have no value. Thomas Shelby is a phantom. He is a man who cannot be summoned, a man who chooses the time and place of every encounter. He understands the Shelby law of strategic unavailability. Your presence must be earned, never expected. In the architecture of power, scarcity creates value. The more you are seen and heard from, the more common you appear. But the man who is a ghost, who appears only when the stakes are highest and the strategy is set, carries an aura of divine authority. This dynamic is perfectly illustrated in Season 5, Episode 2, during Tommy's interaction with the fascist leader Oswald Mosley. Mosley is a man of high birth and immense political ego. He is used to people bowing to his schedule, used to summoning men like dogs to his office. He attempts to command Tommy's presence, to pull him into his orbit as a subordinate ally. But Tommy understands the game being played. He does not rush to meet Mosley. He makes it clear through his silence and his delays that he operates on his own timeline, in his own kingdom. When they finally meet, Tommy occupies the space with a terrifying stillness. He doesn't offer explanations for his absence or apologies for the wait. By making himself unavailable and difficult to reach, he has forced a member of Parliament to recognize that a Peaky Blinder is not a tool to be picked up, but a power to be negotiated with. He has weaponized his absence to increase the weight of his eventual presence. Machiavelli understood that familiarity breeds contempt. In his tactical advice to those who wish to hold power, he noted that a ruler who is too accessible, who is seen too often in the streets or in the common houses, loses the majesty of his position. People begin to see the flaws, the human vulnerabilities, and the cracks in the armor. To maintain the respect and the fear of the masses, a leader must maintain a certain distance. This is why the kings of old lived behind high walls and appeared only in grand processions. The Machiavellian prince knows that mystery is a form of leverage. If the people do not know where you are or what you are doing, they will fill that silence with legends of your power. Your unavailability becomes a psychological force that works in your favor even when you are sleeping. It forces your enemies to guess your moves and your allies to treasure your attention. The common man is a slave to the ping. He replies to texts instantly because he fears being seen as rude. He says yes to every invitation because he is afraid of missing out. He is constantly explaining his schedule, justifying his absence, and apologizing for his business. By doing this, he signals that he is at the bottom of the hierarchy, a servant to the whims of others. He is a commodity, and like all common commodities, his price is low. The man of power, however, is a ghost. He knows that his time is the only non-renewable resource he possesses. He does not chat. He does not catch up. He only engages when there is a strategic objective to be met. He is comfortable with the silence of a phone that isn't ringing, because he knows that when he chooses to call, the world will listen. To apply strategic unavailability today, you must first reclaim your digital sovereignty. Turn off all non-essential notifications. Your phone is a tool for your convenience, not a leash for the world to pull. Stop replying to non-urgent messages instantly. Let them wait hours or even days. This isn't about being busy. It's about being unavailable. It signals that you have a life of such intensity and focus that you cannot be distracted by trivialities. Occasionally decline high-status invitations even when you are free. Do it without giving a detailed excuse. "I won't be able to make it" is a complete sentence that requires no further justification. When you do appear, make your presence felt with the Shelby stride. Move with purpose, speak with economy, and leave while people still want more of you. You are not a man who can be summoned. You are a man who arrives when the time is right to claim the prize. Be the ghost in the room, the mystery in the social circle, and the sovereign of your own hours. The world doesn't need more of your time. It needs to understand that your time is a privilege they have yet to earn. The foundation of every empire does not rest upon external armies or hoarded gold. It rests within the iron discipline that governs the territory between your ears. Thomas Shelby is not a man who fears his enemies. He is a man who fears his own loss of control. The Shelby law is absolute. The only thing that can kill Thomas Shelby is Thomas Shelby himself. For the man of power, the external world is merely a reflection of his internal order. If your mind is a chaotic democracy of impulses, fleeting desires, and primitive fears, you will be overthrown by an internal coup long before your enemy even draws his blade. You must establish an internal monarchy where reason sits upon the throne as an absolute autocrat, and emotions are mere subjects that must be silenced at the first sign of insubordination. Indifference is not merely a mask you wear for the public. It is the constant, unyielding state of your internal being. To witness this internal sovereignty in its most lethal form, we must deconstruct the climax of the 6th season, specifically Episode 6. Thomas Shelby stands at the precipice of his own end. He believes he is dying from an incurable tuberculoma, a death sentence that has isolated him from his world and forced him to say his final goodbyes. He is alone in the mountains, prepared to step into the void. However, it is in this moment of perceived total vulnerability that he uncovers the ultimate betrayal. His doctor, a man he trusted with his life, is a Nazi sympathizer working for Oswald Mosley. The diagnosis was a fabrication, a psychological weapon designed to drive Tommy to suicide and clear the path for the fascists. A common man, upon discovering such a monstrous manipulation, would be consumed by a volcanic, blinding rage. He would seek a bloody, immediate, and loud revenge to soothe his wounded ego. But observe Shelby. When he confronts the doctor, there are no screams, no frantic movements, and no wasted heat. He looks at the man through the sights of a pistol, with a coldness that defies human biology. As the clock strikes the hour Tommy was supposed to be dead, he chooses the ultimate form of indifference. He realizes that the doctor is already a ghost, a non-entity in the grander design of his survival. He decides that the old Tommy did indeed die in those mountains, and what remains is something entirely new, free even from the necessity of petty retaliation. He is not a victim of the lie. He is the judge who decides the defendant doesn't even deserve the effort of an execution. He walks away, leaving the man shivering in the dirt. This is the total victory of the self over the circumstance. Machiavelli, in The Prince, famously taught that a ruler must possess the nature of both the lion and the fox. The lion to frighten the wolves, and the fox to recognize the traps. However, the secret that the masses ignore is that these natures must first be applied to your own psyche. Your internal fox must detect the traps of your own ego and sentimentalism, while your internal lion must crush any weakness that attempts to divert you from your strategic path. Machiavelli argued that the stability of a state depends entirely on the stability of the mind of the prince who governs it. If a prince is perceived as fickle, overly emotional, or hesitant, he is instantly despised and loses his mandate. The internal monarchy of Shelby is the perfect execution of this doctrine. He does not allow his mind to be an open city where any stray emotion can enter and pillage his plans. He governs his thoughts with a scepter of iron, ensuring that his strategy is never contaminated by the biorhythms of human frailty. He is the architect of his own will, operating on a plane where physical pain and mental anguish are merely data points to be processed, filed, and discarded. The common man is a perpetual victim of his own internal environment. He wakes up and lets his mood decide his productivity. If he feels tired, he retreats. If he feels insulted, he lashes out. He is a slave to his neurotransmitters, a biological puppet twitching to the rhythm of chemical reactions he doesn't even understand. He lives in a state of internal anarchy, where fear, pleasure, and laziness fight for control, resulting in a life of reaction rather than action. The man of power, conversely, is the environment. He does not feel the day, he dictates it. He practices the discipline of observation without absorption. He sees the storm brewing, but he does not let the water into his boat. He sees the betrayal, but he does not let the poison reach his heart. He remains the unmoving center of a hurricane of social chaos, watching the world spin while he remains perfectly, terrifyingly still. To apply this internal monarchy in your modern social chess, you must begin with a ruthless audit of reactions. For the next week, every time you feel a surge of emotion, whether it's anger at a passive-aggressive email, anxiety before a presentation, or the desperate need for validation after a win, you must label that emotion immediately. Tell yourself, "This is my ego seeking attention," or "This is a primitive fear response." By naming the emotion, you decouple yourself from the reaction. You cease to be the emotion and become the observer of the emotion. Combine this with the practice of negative visualization. Assume that every plan you have will fail, and every ally you have will betray you. Do not do this with pessimism, but with the clinical detachment of a general preparing for the worst-case scenario. If you have already accepted the betrayal in your mind, when it occurs in reality, your indifference will be your indestructible armor. You will not waste a second on grief. You will simply move to the next calculated play. Live by the code that nothing and no one has the authority to alter your internal state without your explicit permission. You are the king, the judge, and the executioner of your own mind. The world may be on fire, but within your fortress of indifference, the air is cool and the vision is absolute. Power is not a scream. It is a whisper that makes the world stop and listen. Throughout this transmission, we have dismantled your reactive nature and rebuilt it in the image of something far more dangerous. A man of pure indifference. You have come to understand that the face is a mask, silence is a weapon, and availability is a weakness of the common soul. You have seen how Thomas Shelby transformed the soot and blood of Birmingham into a global empire, not through the bluster of a thug, but through the surgical sovereignty of a strategist who realized that he had nothing left to lose. You have learned from Machiavelli that power is a cold architecture, where morality is a tool and effectiveness is the only law that matters. Now, the theory must yield to the execution. Knowledge without application is merely noise, and noise does not build empires. Your reign begins in the silence of your next decision. The first territory you must conquer is your own conduct in the next 24 hours. Your challenge is simple, yet it will be the hardest thing you have ever done. Do not offer a single explanation for your actions. Do not apologize for a preference or a choice. If you are asked why you did something, answer with silence or a flat, unyielding, "Because that is what I decided." Feel the discomfort of those around you as they try to pull you back down into their world of justifications and social pleasantries. Remain unmoved. Walk with the Shelby stride, shoulders back, eyes focused on the objective, soul detached from the opinions of the masses. Notice how the atmosphere in a room shifts when people realize they can no longer find a hook in your emotions to pull you where they want you to go. You are no longer a participant in the drama of life. You are the author of the script. Remember this: the world is crowded with people desperate to be loved, validated, and understood. You are no longer one of them. You are the silent observer, the one who knows that true power is the ability to look at everything the common man desires and say, "This has no power over me." Indifference is the ultimate freedom. It is the armor that makes you untouchable and the blade that severs the strings of social manipulation. As Thomas Shelby famously declared, "I don't have friends, I have people who are useful." Take this cold truth into the boardroom, into the social circle, and into your private reflections. Be sovereign. Be cold. Be the storm that no one saw coming, because you were too busy being the silence that precedes it. The throne of your life has been vacant for too long. Sit on it and ask for permission from no one.